Have you ever worked for someone that was very defensive? I mean, you wanted to tell that person to get a life, relax, come on, ease up. But time and time again, they get defensive, and it's frustrating. Well, today in Church Tips Podcast, this episode, we're going to talk about exactly how you can avoid being a defensive leader so that you don't react this way towards others. Here we go. You know, as I was preparing for this particular episode, I was just reflecting on the kinds of people I've worked with over the years. And, as you might guess, with all this gray hair, have been the whole range of people, the very strong people, the very not so confident people, and everybody in between. Well, and I'm trying to think of the subject here today is how to avoid being a defensive leader. So I've thought, who are some pastors I've come across that just always seem to be defensive about things? Right? They were kind of a little edge to them, and I just couldn't come up with anybody. And then I went and looked in the mirror, and I thought, oh my goodness, Lord, why do you have to make this so apparent to me? I remember one time I was talking to a gal, good gal. And in fact, she and her husband become fast friends of my wife and I. But I remember dealing with Karen, and Karen was so right on so many things. And yet I was an insecure, defensive leader. And I was really showing my true colors and not being the kind of leader I needed to be. So maybe that's you, maybe it's not, maybe it's the furthest thing from you, but all of us have weaknesses in our own leadership. And in my particular case, I ended up being on the defensive side as a leader. We want to talk to you today. Fortunately, the Lord has helped me grow beyond that. And we want to be able to help you just think through some things about how you can avoid being a defensive leader.
Yeah. That's good. Well, let's just jump in.
Yeah, why don't you jump in and get us started?
Here of ways to avoid.
Give me some tips on how I'm supposed to fix myself.
You need some church tips today, don't you?
I need some church tips.
Well, the first thing is you want to remind yourself of who you are. And it goes back to just the ability for you to inventory yourself, to examine yourself, and take a real hard look at who you are. Who have you, not only who you are in terms of your relationship with God and that you are a child of God, and your salvation, but even the calling and the direction that God has given you to accomplish through ministry. Know what you value in life. All these things are part of who you are, and you have to start by knowing who you are. And if you didn't know who you were,
I was no spring chicken at that. I was probably in my early to mid 40s at the time.
Yeah.
So
like really old.
Well, yeah, that's right. Like somebody's coming up on it. I'm telling you.
Just teasing. No, that's so young.
But the fact is, it can happen to any of us, young or old. And so remind yourself of who you are.
Yeah.
That you really, you're the child of God, and He has great plans for you, and you need to have the security of leading in that.
Yep.
Another thing that I factor when I just look back on that situation is I wasn't responding correctly to criticism. So, at least Jonathan and I have faced our fair share of criticism along the way, and I'm going to bet as a pastor you have too. You've got to rightly respond to criticism. Recognize that people around you believe in you.
Yeah.
By the critics you want to pay attention are the people closest to you who love you and want the very best for you. Mm-hmm. In fact, in episode 38, we talk about how a pastor can address conflict with a church member. Mm-hmm. We drive specifically to that issue of criticism because it's there and it's going to be there. Yep. If you're going to lead, you're going to lead anything that's worth leading, which obviously the church is, you're going to face critics, and you've got to rightly respond to them. I will say as well, you've got to consider the source of the criticism.
That's true, right.
The critic that's that far away from you versus the critic that's right here are two different things. In both cases, you have to rightly respond to that criticism.
Yeah, and for our Leaders.Church members, we actually have a full series inside the membership on criticism.
We do.
Dealing with critics in ministry. That's a great series to check out. If that happens to be where you're at today and you're trying to figure out how do I navigate this, that'd be something for you to check out here in the membership. Another thing, just kind of on the heels of that this reminds me of, is the idea of buying time. So when you're in the middle of a situation where you might be facing criticism, maybe you're in a moment where you're being defensive to someone, is trying to step back for a moment, even if it's a few seconds, or even if you can defer and not have to respond right away because you know who you are and you know maybe how you respond is
defenses come up.
Yep. Say, hey, you know what? Let me pause. Let me take some deep breaths. Let me even get back to you on this rather than having to give an answer or respond right away. Certainly you can do that if it's more like communication through email or something like that. But I'm thinking specifically, if you're right in the middle of a conversation, is there a way for you to buy yourself some time? Don't allow yourself to step back.
Don't allow the heat of the moment to cause you to make a rash emotional decision that you'll regret.
Yep.
When you step away, you buy yourself time.
That's right. Yep.
The other part of it, at least for me, was I ultimately had to buck up and smell the roses. It's like I had to be a big boy. And here I was dealing with this gal, and she's a very strong gal. But I had to buck up and realize that I was not right. And I was throwing defenses up when I shouldn't have. I should have been stepping up and modeling leadership for her when I really wasn't. I was being a defensive leader. Nobody's perfect. I'm the first one to say I'm not perfect. He's not perfect. You're not perfect. Yeah. But God has called you to lead anyway. He's called a very imperfect pastor called you, Jonathan, Dick, to lead. Really, you want to blame it on somebody, blame it on the Lord, because you're there to lead. Nobody's got it all together. That includes us and you, but you can lead. To do that, you just have to buck up, own it, and lead, and drop the defenses, and just own who you are, own what you're doing, and you'll see good things happen at the church.
All right, let's do a quick recap.
Number one, so if you're going to avoid being a defensive leader, we encourage you to remind yourself of who you are, and you're the Lord's. Number two, respond rightly to criticism. Buy time to allow you to make a good decision. And number four, buck up and smell the roses. If you'll do those four things, you'll see your defenses drop. May not happen overnight, but you'll see yourself be in a better position where you can respond better and lead better.
That's right. Well, with that being the case, we want to thank you so much for being with us today. We have a review that we have from someone on Apple Podcasts. R. Gurian said this about the Church Tips podcast. It's concise and meaningful information that is valuable for anyone in a leadership role, well worth listening to. Well, we want to thank you, R. Gurian, for that review, and we would love to have you leave a review. If you would, go to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review, leave a comment, and we would love to read it on a future podcast episode. As well, if you're listening or watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can subscribe to all future episodes coming out here on our channel. And we just thank you so much for being with us today on this episode. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Hey, Jonathan here, real quick before you go. Everything in your ministry rises and falls on your leadership. So investing in your leadership is essential to staying healthy and growing the ministry. And that's why I want to invite you to join us inside the Leaders.Church membership. This online streaming service for pastors gives you access to more than 300 videos plus training material to level up your leadership and improve your ministry skills. If you'd like to do that, I want to invite you to go to Leaders.Church/boost. Again, that's Leaders.Church/boost. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Church Tips podcast. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.